are you doing, Aleksandra?
Great. I'm really excited for season 2.
Yeah, it's great to have such a fantastic lineup. I think we have to keep it secret for a while now, especially that we have a special guest coming in February. But
we managed to keep Lady Hale a secret for a very, very long time. So I think we can cope.
So it's very, very exciting, the lineup for our guests. What's your thoughts on our previous season, or first season?
You know what? I think a lot of first of all, it was incredibly exciting, and I didn't really expect such warm reception from everybody. It was, I think, what started with us just talking on a phone and then going, oh, maybe we should just start recording it and see what people want to say. Or, how cool would it be to speak to all these women? Suddenly turned out to be this massive community. And I don't mean massive as in, we don't have 1 million followers, but
yet.
Yes. But it's really nice to see how supportive everybody has been, not just of us, but also of our speakers. And it was maybe on the sadder side, I think this is the sentiment that we shared. One of the shocking revelations that came out was that a lot of our speakers would say that, oh, it's the first time that we've been asked about our work as opposed to, just how we got there. Or, it's the first time that it's a pleasure to speak with someone who actually read our work.
Yeah, I think this was exactly my impression too, that's almost the saddest, so to say, aspect that so many speakers felt. It's nobody really engages with their work and with the substance of their arguments. And I suppose this is not the first time in history that this happens, when academics and intellectuals feel they're not being taken seriously or not being heard. I think in our original teaser for season 1, we did mention the Oxford Four, who felt they couldn't speak up unless there was no man in the room because of the they were at war. And actually, Elizabeth Anscombe, that reminds me of another episode of her life, when in 1956 she opposed the granting of honorary degree at Oxford to President Truman because of his involvement in Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombing. And when she opposed it, she has never been taken seriously. It was considered a nuisance that she advocated this protest, and of course it went nowhere, and no one really heard her. So there are hundreds and hundreds of stories like that, where women in academia didn't feel they are actually being heard, and one is willing to engage with the substance of the arguments, ethical or moral or legal, that they have to offer.
Yeah, but you know what? First of all, have you read Metaphysical Animals? Is that where you're getting the stories from?
Yeah. Well, I was actually familiar with this story before, but obviously over the summer I had the chance to go through some interesting reading, Metaphysical Animals being one of them, which is a lovely biographical story of Philippa Foot, Iris Murdoch, Elizabeth Anscombe, and which one I've missed?
Mary Midgley.
Mary Midgley, obviously.
Which is quite ironic that's the one you missed out. Yeah.
Yeah, so she's the most metaphysical animal of them all. She was the most committed to metaphysical philosophy, as opposed to Elizabeth Anscombe, whom was much more interested in analytical philosophy. So it's interesting that I missed that key metaphysical animal. But yeah, this summer, reading wise, was quite fascinating to me. I managed to go through much of Iris Murdoch's work, including her philosophical work on sovereignty of good. This is because I'm working on a paper on a paradox of feminist jurisprudence, which takes on reflective account of our podcast, or that was the spur for the article that I'm currently working on. And the argument there is that any attempt to promote female or female scholarship paradoxically leads to having them isolated in a certain outsider box of feminist jurisprudence.
So you mean labeling and effectively pigeonholing women on the basis of very immutable characteristics, as opposed to the work that they are trying to engage with?
Yes, so it's a sad observation, really, that even our project could be seen as framing women into this kind of strictly narrow feminist box where no one dares to venture into. And that made, I think, actually, feminist scholars themselves feel that they are outsiders in academia. But obviously, our project is aiming to normalize academics in any field. So our argument is women are working in any area of the law, and this podcast is here to give them voice.
I think it's interesting because I look at it almost as doing the feminist scholarship a favor, because in a way you admit that this is a very distinct area of philosophy. It's not just a one size fits all. You're a woman, therefore you're a feminist legal scholar.
Mm-hmm.
It's drawing these boundaries and creating a category very much along the same lines as, analytic philosophy, right? More broadly, or philosophy of language. Why can't feminist legal philosophy or feminist legal theory not be of the equal standing to, critical legal theory, where when you say those phrases, people know what those labels mean. Whereas I think that there definitely is this connection to immutable characteristics that just needs to be revised and needs to be revisited. But it was interesting for me, thinking back to our first season, that a lot of our speakers also admitted that was the case. And I don't want to say who that was, but I remember one of our guests saying off the record that when she joined the faculty was looking for a feminist legal scholar, and they effectively said to her, "Oh yeah, you're going to be doing this now." And she said, "Well, I'm not a feminist legal scholar." Mm-hmm. There is an entire stream of scholarship that I just don't work with or don't work within. Mm-hmm. So I think overall, the feedback that we've got so far, I'm not sure if you agree, but at least the feedback that I've got so far is that we are doing a lot of good work in highlighting women generally.
Yeah, and of course the unfortunate thing is that this label acquired negative connotations, that sometimes you speak of even feminist scholars themselves describe it as feminist ghetto, for example. So there is this negative connotation about feminist scholarship, and I think this shouldn't be. It comes from somewhere, to be honest. It's not simply a matter of perception, or could be a matter of perception and bias. I don't know. It's still to be established. But we need to dismantle this picture of women as being confined to any specific narrow area of work, or being members of some kind of outsider academic community. I think it's wrong.
And I wonder how much of that is also just tribalism and the idea that people don't like fuzzy edges around anything. And it's the same, I guess, with practice in academia, that you can't be practicing if you're an academic, or if you work in legal theory, you can't be of a practical, pragmatic mind. And this is a very strange phenomenon. And as you said, I don't know if we're going to be able to unpack it in the next 5 minutes, but it would be interesting to hear from this season's speakers as well about around their thoughts on the subject. And this also brings me to our speakers lineup for this season, and including people whose work really quite directly affects how we think about subjects like technology, or how we think about subjects like, just general digital economy,
It's interesting you mentioned that field, because I'm very excited to see guests from that background or with that background. They are very, very pragmatic. And I had some conversations with colleagues here at Newcastle Law School who work in this field, and they observation was it's surprising that actually in technology field there is a lot of female scholars who are not necessarily feminists, but they unpack a number of philosophically relevant issues. So when we think about, I don't know, artificial intelligence and the ethical implications of employing artificial intelligence in the legal field, that's automatically a metaphysical animal thing. And the question about human agency and the question to what extent the machines can replace humans, or maybe not replace, but supplement their work.
So that's interesting you mentioned artificial intelligence, because it's every single, as it happens, I work in the field at the moment, and every single conversation boils down in one way or another to ethics and very philosophical discussions around not just nature of our experience, but also generally nature of reality. I had a very interesting discussion about Nozick's experience machine not too long ago. And it's interesting to see how practitioners have to really think hard, and they rediscover those philosophical themes that are very familiar to everybody in academia, as if they were just written yesterday and it's this biggest news of them all. But in fact, what should happen is we should be working more closely together and more collaboratively. And there are groups who are really getting together to merge practitioners' experience with this very expert academic knowledge, especially on areas including artificial intelligence.
Well, I wonder if perhaps philosophy could do some disservice to this area, and it has done some disservice, because the expression artificial intelligence to some extent was very much promoted and absorbed by the philosophical field. And as one of our guests, Professor Sarah Losky, made it very plain, there is nothing particularly intelligent about artificial intelligence. Sometimes those softwares, even if ambitious, even if capable of processing multiple data at the same time, actually lack connection to the external world, and therefore can never be described as intelligent. Something that Elon Musk would challenge probably, because I think he observed that the artificial intelligence is something that we should really be afraid of, and it's capable of taking over the world. I'm not sure how philosophical that reference is.
That's interesting, because it's I think a philosophical method would be very helpful for people having these debates and going back to first principles, agreeing on the definitions, agreeing on a common language, because even the definition of artificial intelligence, when you look at Alan Turing Institute's fantastic work on the glossary for new tech, if everybody even applied this definition, we would be having a completely different conversation. Because unfortunately, at the moment, when we talk about artificial intelligence, there are people who are talking about artificial intelligence now, which is, a lot of the time just automation, natural language processing, but, it's not robo lawyers, right? And then you have futurists who are imagining a future and trying to plan for the future. And those two crowds collide without any agreement on definitions. And it just turns into chaos and unfolds into some of the most erratic debates, where everybody just gets angry with each other.
It's interesting that you've mentioned agreement in language. That's a notion first or widely adopted by Ludwig Wittgenstein, whom we've already mentioned in this podcast on multiple occasions. And
I think Ludwig Wittgenstein, in the context of our podcast, is now an honorary woman.
Yeah, I think he wouldn't mind. I think he was always prepared to challenge boundaries of standard thinking about reality, he was also confused about his place in the world.
Oh, you mean changing his mind 3 times on his own argument?
Changing his mind about philosophical arguments, but more importantly, fundamental questions about whom he was as a human being, whom he identified himself to be. I think Wittgenstein is an interesting case in every respect. But I've mentioned this notion of agreement in language. Ludwig Wittgenstein emphasized that agreement in language is something essentially or fundamentally fluid, not fixed. So you've mentioned that we should agree on definition, but I think he would have challenged this. He would have said that you can only agree temporarily in a given local context.
Yeah, but so that's all I'm asking for. I'm not talking about agreeing like a massive glossary that everybody has to adhere from now onwards. It's more when you are having a debate at a particular point in time in a particular space, you need to be able to understand what those reference points mean to each other or how they relate to each other, because otherwise you are talking past each other.
Well, I'm delighted that our podcast is aiming to arrive at some common understandings. And this is what we always invite our speakers to do, to explain what do they mean by the terms they employ in their work, and trying to find meaningful point of intersection with their readers and those who converse with them. So it's been a constant feature of our podcast, trying to encourage the speakers to explain terms of art or their own definitions they employ to our audiences.
But let's face it, everybody's favorite part is the 5 questions that we ask in the end, where there is a collective sigh of, oh, these are so hard. But I was quite surprised with how many of our guests had the same journey to academia and the same journey to law, and usually quite non-conventional.
Well, it's hardly surprising. We've mentioned that in previous podcasts that it seems to be the case that a reflective person wouldn't immediately know their place in the world. So it's a journey. It's a collection of happy or not so happy coincidences that would lead one to find their place in the world. And I think I hope this is instructive to our younger audiences and younger listeners who are still feeling, I should now know what I'm going to do with my life, and I still don't know. Well, there is nothing wrong about it. The key is to explore opportunities in front of you to your full potential at the time and place, and the future will present itself out of those local, temporarily narrowed opportunities. I think that's pretty accurate. I don't know what you
so basically what you're saying is not all who wander are lost.
Yes unexamined life is not a life worth living. Yeah,
we're just gonna keep on proceeding on the quotes from the greats. Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think it's really underrated, the ability to be comfortable with uncertainty, and as I typically say, just ride the wave. Things will come and go, things will come your way. If you have a 5-10 year plan that you're not even sure if you actually want to pursue, or if you don't know what your definition of happiness is. Oh, back to definitions, who would have thought? What your flexible definition of happiness is, and if you don't engage in this reflective practice of oh, what is it that I actually want, is this what I want, then you miss out on a lot of opportunities that come your way.
I think this is also true of our podcast. We didn't know where we're going to end up with it and whom we're going to end up engaging with, and the wider community we're going to engage.
I must say that I'm delighted that this idea of intellectual curiosity and journey without a set destination has really been the guiding light of our podcast. And it's really fantastic how many people we've met along the way and the community we began to build. And I must also highlight that you have been shortlisted for the Inspirational Women in Law Award this year, which is phenomenal. And a round of applause.
Well, thank you. That's a round of applause for the podcast, because really the nomination and the shortlisting was connected to my work and your work on this Just Theory podcast, and I cannot be delighted more about this, because this means that we are really reaching wider audiences inside and outside of academia, because that award comes from environment that is both academic but also full of practitioners. So it's fantastic to see our podcasts recognized by the next 100 years of Women in Law initiative.
Perfect. And we need to include a link to next 100 years, because Dana and her team are doing a fantastic work. And I can't encourage people enough to go check out their website, go check out what they're doing, because it's absolutely phenomenal. And as you said.
And we are very excited to attend the awards ceremony, because it's going to be great event in Clifford Chance offices in London. So I cannot wait to fantastic night in the most wonderful company, including Baroness Hale.
I was going to say that I think in the invite it actually says in brackets that Baroness Hale is going to be there. So we will join the queue. Hopefully we have some priority queue spots because of your shortlisting. But I remember speaking to someone, and that every single time Baroness Hale attends any event, there's this like circle automatically forming around her. And it also brings me back to our opportunity to speak with her, and what an inspirational person that is. I think we were both a bit starstruck during and after.
I was very starstruck. We should add a link on top of this video to Lady Hale's episode, because it's been very, very interesting chat.
And we have another special guest, as you already mentioned at the beginning, coming this season. So please stay tuned.
Already starstruck.
Already starstruck. I'm already losing sleep over what that's going to be like, because it's such phenomenal intellect.
So everyone, please stay tuned, and we cannot wait to see you and see our speakers for the next season,
and perhaps see you at the award ceremony. It's on 1st of November, as Emilia mentioned, at Clifford Chance. We hope to see you there. Hi, it's Aleksandra here. Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you like our project, have any questions, or would like to recommend a guest or a topic, drop us a line on just.theory.project@gmail.com. This season was made possible with the generous funding of Newcastle University. If you like, you can buy us a coffee. Your support will enable us to continue our work. Just Theory, changing the face of legal theory.